Right, so this video will show you how to make profiteroles, which is using choux pastry. So that is something that we haven't done before, so it is a new skill, although some of you may have had to go at home, but I'm assuming that most of you won't have done this. The first thing that you need to do before starting to do any cooking whatsoever is to make sure that you've got everything prepared ready, because you need to get the next step done quite quickly. So before you actually start to do anything, make sure that you've greased your baking tray, that you've got your flour ready in your bowl, and you've also beaten your eggs in a separate bowl so that they can get added to the pan as soon as you need them. In your saucepan then, you need to have your butter and your water. If you actually break your butter up into smaller pieces, then it will speed the melting process up, but either way we need to bring that up to the boil. So if you turn your hob on, not onto a full heat, but certainly onto about a medium heat, because we don't want to do it too quickly, but we don't want it to take too long either. And then you just need to start melting the butter, and then the mixture will actually come up to a boil. So keep stirring while the butter is melting, and that will again help it to actually melt a bit quicker. Now, a choux pastry is a different type of pastry. You will have done short crust pastry before when you made your tarte chonade in year 9. And we will have a go at making some puff pastry as well. But this is a different kind of pastry. This is your choux pastry. Now, choux pastry can be used to make profiteroles, which is what I'm going to do in the demonstration here. It can also be used to make eclairs. And you can also use it for savoury dishes. So it is quite a versatile dough to use, a pastry, to use. It is important, however, that you get this up to boiling point and you really do let it boil. Some pupils in the past have actually just got it to this stage where the butter is actually melted into the water, or melted along with the water, and not let it actually reach boiling point, and the profiteroles don't actually rise as much then, they just tend to stay as blobs on the tray. So it is really important that you get it to boiling point. So you can see now that this is actually starting to boil. I'm just going to let it boil for about 30 seconds to make sure that it really is at boiling point. So don't turn it off straight away. Okay, just make sure that it is really boiling. And what you're going to do then after this stage, once you remove it from the heat, is straight away add the flour. Okay, so we're taking it off the heat, flour ready in a bowl. Just place that into your pan and then straight away start mixing it up. What you need to do at this point is actually get it to form a paste, which will be your choux paste. It is important at this stage that you make sure that you are mixing it sufficiently, because this is where some of the gluten actually starts to develop, which is what's going to then make sure that your profiteroles stay risen when you actually cook them. So it should come into a ball of dough, but be quite paste-like. We're then going to let that just cool slightly before we start adding the egg. So once the mixture is just cooled slightly, pop your egg into there as well. And again, you need to actually just beat it to get a ball of dough that you're going to be able to pipe into the required shapes for your profiteroles. Okay, just keep mixing it around. It may take a little while to come together, but that's fine. We don't need to rush the process. Obviously, it's more important that it all comes together properly rather than the speed at which we actually manage to do that. So you should get to the stage where your paste is nice and smooth and it is actually all come together without looking lumpy. This is where, as I said, pupils in the past, if they haven't boiled up the mixture, it tends to actually stay quite runny. So it is really important to get that water to boiling point and then make sure you're adding your flour straight away, not actually leaving too long. So the paste here now is ready for us to actually use. Okay, you'll probably find that the easiest way to fill your piping bag up is to actually position it, place it into a cup, and then spoon it in. You can try and keep hold of it, which is what I started to do initially, but it can get quite messy. So if you do balance it in a cup, it just means that you've got that bit of support, and it gives you then both of your hands to work with. So once you've got it in the bag, it is quite runny, so you need to be careful when you're actually piping it and be quite quick in what you're doing. Make sure that you leave enough space in between the profiteroles for them to actually rise in the oven. So you do need to make sure that you leave a bit of a gap between them. But as I said, you also need to make sure that you're working quite quickly, because the paste will actually start to come out very, very easily. It is important as well when you're doing this to try and keep them as evenly sized as possible, because obviously they're all going to be in the oven as they're on the one tray for the same amount of time. So we want to make sure that they're all going to be cooked to the same standard, rather than actually taking some out and then having to leave some of them in. So once you've got all of your profiteroles, we need to pop those into the oven. So that is something I did forget to say at the start, that you need to make sure that you preheat your oven. So your oven needs to be on gas mark 6, which is 200 degrees Celsius, and your profiteroles are going to go in there for 15 minutes. So when your profiteroles go into the oven, I would suggest, whether you're working at home or in school, that the next thing you do is actually get all of your dishes cleared up, because it is a good idea to keep on top and keep your work surface as clear as possible. So keep on top of your dishes. Okay, once you've done that, you can actually start to prepare your cream. Now you can actually whisk up double cream using an electric whisk. I tend to find with double cream that it does actually, once it starts thickening up, it does turn very, very quickly. And this is basically all we use in order to make butter. So you can very quickly get to the point where it over whips and it starts separating it out. So I would suggest that you put it into a small bowl and use a fork, or you can actually use one of the hand whisks, but I certainly wouldn't recommend using an electric whisk, because as I said, it will actually thicken up very, very quickly. So you can see with the cream now that it's actually starting to thicken up. Now this stage usually goes very, very quickly. Once it's started to thicken, it gets, as I said, to the point of over thickening very, very quickly. So you just want to make sure that it's thick enough that you're going to be able to pipe it into the profiteroles, but you don't want to actually overbeat it at this stage. So at that consistency now, I'm going to actually stop beating it. So doing exactly as I did with the choux pastry paste, I'm going to put my cream into a piping bag ready to use, and again I've just actually balanced that into a small plastic beaker to make sure that it holds it steady for me while I'm actually putting the cream in. So once the profiteroles are out of the oven, the next thing we need to do is just actually make a slit into the side of the profiteroles. That will actually help them to cool down and means that we can put the cream into them. So while the profiteroles are cooling down, you can get your chocolate melted ready to go onto the top, and just secure the top of your piping bag so that you can start piping the cream in. So if you take your profiterole, put the piping bag in to the slit that you've made, and then just actually pipe the cream. And I'm going to place those straight into my serving dish, which I'll put into the screen now so that you can see it, ready to put the topping on them. So I've got my profiteroles going into this dish. Again, with your piping bag, making sure that you keep it really tight on the top so it doesn't actually squirt out the wrong way. And then if you find where you've made the slit in your profiterole, pop your piping bag in and then just squeeze gently until the profiterole is filled with cream. So if you were actually doing this to serve in a restaurant or as part of your practical exam, decide how many you actually want to put into your serving dish. so that you know then when you're going to start put the chocolate topping on. So I've decided that I'm going to put 5 into my serving there, so I've got 5 into the dish. And then with the chocolate, now you can actually make your own chocolate sauce. You don't need to use melted chocolate on this occasion, because I think it would be sufficient for you to make sure you're piping up the cream, whipping up the cream properly, and having a go at profiteroles. I think it would be okay just to use some melted chocolate like I have, but if you were doing this for a practical exam, I would actually recommend that you make a proper chocolate sauce. So you can just then spoon the chocolate over. And again, if you were doing this for an exam, you may want to think about how you could actually lay them out on a plate as opposed to serving them in a bowl to improve the presentation. But there you've actually got a dessert which would actually get you some good marks in an exam, because you are showing some high skill with the making of the choux pastry and then the presentation of the profiteroles. And along the way, as I said, if you make up your own cheese sauce and the thickening up of the cream so that it doesn't actually get over whipped, and there, as I said, you have something which you can then serve. Hopefully, as I said, you'll enjoy eating it at this stage though, and you may actually see where you can make some improvements next time.